Now, to discuss the future of the Marine Corps, please welcome General Christopher Mahoney, Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, in conversation with Dr. Nadia Schadlow, Advisor on SCSP's Board of Advisors.
So thanks so much for being here this afternoon with us, General Mahoney. It's a pleasure to have this conversation. I thought I would sort of lay out some of the themes that I wanted to get to this afternoon, just to let the audience know. We'll discuss a little bit about Force Design 2030. We'll discuss some of the Marine Corps' plans regarding modernization, and then tech innovation and adoption, and then finally some issues, if we're able to get to it, in terms of integration with the Joint Force and other operational challenges we're facing. So let's start with Force Design 2030, General Mahoney. When it first came out years ago, was it 2018 now it was announced, roughly? There was a lot of emotion, I would say, associated with changing the Marine Corps and the structure of the Marine Corps, and there were many articles by many retired generals and others who were very upset by the proposed changes. Can you talk a little bit about that and where we are today and how things are going with one of the most important restructurings we've seen in the department?
Sure, thanks. I think maybe just a little background. The tale of three commandants. The problem statement for force design, or the demand or the necessity for it, was first brought up by General Neller when he said, look, we are not manned, trained, or equipped for the future fight. And General Berger came in and looked at the 2018 National Defense Strategy and said, General Neller was right. We need to change, and not only do we need to change, we need to take a comprehensive look, man, train, equip, and then logistically at how we do business. And out of that came the design called Force Design 2030. We've since then dropped the 2030 part because we realize that it's a progression. It's a continuous cycle. So those were the first two commandants. You had the necessity, you had the design, and now you have General Smith, who is the implementer. And of those three things, I will tell you that the implementation part is probably the hardest. But the tenets of force design or modernization, the gear, make sure we have what we need in order to fight the future fight. Talent management, let's make sure we have the right Marines with the right skill sets and keep them around longer. Training and education to get away from the static sort of brick and mortar approach and get into more live, virtual, and constructive to escape the physical delimitations of a training range or a classroom. And lastly, logistics. And I'll say we've probably taken an intellectual holiday to some extent on logistics. So let's talk about the implementation part here real quick. We have made structural, functional, and organizational changes to make parts of the force more distributed, to make them more adept at movement, maneuver, and sustainment with a smaller signature, to give them longer range fires, to give them exquisite sensing capabilities, and more autonomous and robotic systems in order to see, sense, and understand the environment, be able to ingest that information and information from other sources and domains, rationalize it and use it for organic effects, or be able to offload it to the joint force in order for the joint force to either decide or bring effects to bear. So those changes that we have made are going apace. I would say that in a world of flat budgets, it's very, very difficult to modernize across those pillars at the pace that we want to modernize. But programmatically, we've shifted and will continue to move in that direction. Now, importantly, we didn't just take the directions, the blueprints, lay them down, and build the house blindly. We have been going through a series of campaign of learning adjustments and refinements since 2019, right up until today. So we have shifted and adjusted, and we'll continue to do that as we go downrange. I think if I could say two things about how we realized the main of the original design, it would be to accelerate those changes and create a depth and a resilience to those changes, a depth of magazine that we touched on very briefly before we come in here. So going forward, the vector of force design, the changes in the main are exactly where we need to go.
Okay.
We will continue to reform and refine along the way beyond 2030.
Okay. I'd like to go back and get to some of the specific modernization capabilities you need. But before that, just before we leave the Force Design 2030 overall, or Force Design, what are we calling it then?
We
Force
just say
Design.
Force Design.
Force Design, okay, with no date. I wanted to go back to stand-in forces. If you could tell us a little bit about stand-in forces and the Marine, are they MLRs, Marine littoral units, right?
So we've generated 2 Marine littoral regiments, which are multi-domain formations that have the attributes that I mentioned earlier. They're smaller, they're able to be distributed, they have longer range fires, they have better precision. They have the ability to have to use organic ISR, autonomous systems, and exquisite sensing. Once again, to be that forward edge in the WES, if you will, in a contested space, and then rationalize the data that they collect, deliver it to organic systems to have the effect, hold targets at risk, offboard that into a joint fires network to enable better decisions to be made or better effectors to hit a target, for instance.
Okay. And do you feel that the lessons, the learning of lessons is taking place quickly? You mentioned that earlier in terms of you're seeing what works, what doesn't, that the force does have the agility to absorb what it needs, to learn a lesson, to do something differently. And do you have the capabilities that you need when you're discussing modernization needs and the innovative technologies? We're seeing so much here on the floor today. Are they getting into the force at the timing that you need?
Yeah, you know, intellectually, I think we are able to turn very quickly. This is the new problem or challenge that arises. Here is a way to approach that, and here's a solution set that we think we should bring to bear. Now, bring in the triumvirate, and I'm not talking about Crassus, Brutus, and Caesar. I'm talking about requirements, acquisition, and resourcing. Your ideas have to run through those 3 cycles, which at times can be very cumbersome, very serpentine, and very slow. So the mind and the solutions may come very quick, but when exposed to those 3 elements, it can slow down. Happily, I see Doug Beck out there in the audience. We have people and outfits that are less concerned with that and more concerned with bringing the ideas, making them real, scaling them, and getting them in the hands of the operator.
Right.
So there's a tension there.
Right. Have you seen improvements over the past few years on that? I mean, you mentioned Doug. I can't actually see through the lights here, but Defense Innovation Unit, and there's been a big effort now, essentially, to use the authorities that the department has. It's not necessarily about new authorities. It's taking the risk and using what you have. Is that actually happening?
I think it's happening probably at increments and speeds that we're happy about but not satisfied. As a service, we need to continue to push on those and push the horizon further out in order to speed up and get the changes that we need on time. I will say, though, that the refinements of each of those 3 factors, there's got to be a portion of each one. You can't just target PPBE, for instance, and expect the requirement side or the acquisition side to follow along. Like you can't just go after JSIDs and expect PPBE and acquisition to follow on. There has to be refinements across the board in order to get a wholesale acceleration and meaningful refinement in time.
Mm-hmm. Is there technology out there that you wish you were getting faster, or are there things that you're seeing that you wish you could bring into the force? And do you have the people, the Marines in the force that can use that technology most effectively in terms of how you're recruiting and training and absorbing the technology?
Yeah, I think from high-end capital investments, I think Admiral Pitts was up here talking about shipbuilding and how we need to go faster, we need to expand the industrial base, we need to be able to put ships in the water quicker, all the way down to the smaller, lower-end items that rely more on software, rely more on issues of advanced manufacturing. I think we have to look at all of that, and there's a balance across the board. But again, I think it's pushing on those three elements to get that acceleration to take place.
Right. Do you think, are you seeing in terms of, leaders really across the department, but across the Marines, a willingness to forego the perfect for the producible and the scalable? We in the more think tank world often have been writing, and I think, a lot about this idea about producibility and scalability over the perfect, the bespoke.
I've said balance a couple of times, and I believe that the requirements balance has to be something akin to what you just talked about. You cannot let the gold-plated or the best be a mortal enemy of the operationally sufficient or the good enough. So how do we get there from the system that we're in right now, which tends to reward cycles toward the very, very highly integrated and best out there when you could have produced en masse something perhaps a little bit less capable, but with much more capacity.
Right. So the CNO was on just before us, as you know, and I think there was a question there about improved integration across the force, and the Marines, a key part of what you do is essentially integrate with the Navy, right? So what is happening in that domain? Can you tell us a little bit about your successes over the past years? What's working? Is integration improving, especially as you're changing the Corps itself, and also ensuring that integration is still high?
Yeah, the old joke is in 1775 they offered a bunch of guys some rum and some beer to go to sea and fight with the Navy. And in 2025, we're still fighting with the Navy. But all joking aside, integration with the Navy it's not something that we target and do. Everything from our corpsmen to our docks to our chaplains are integrated with the Navy. Every time we go to sea aboard an ARGMU or any naval vessel, it's integrated with the Navy. The Navy's capstone doctrine of distributed maritime operations is supported by expeditionary advanced base operations and littoral ops in a contested environment, which are two of the primary pistons that affected force design changes for us. So there's an integration at the doctrine level. At the staff level, which gets things done out in the fleet, we have integrated staffs in 7th Fleet, in 6th Fleet, and in 5th Fleet. And I was just out to visit Task Force 61-2 at 6th Fleet and Task Force 51-5 out at 5th Fleet. So integration is something that we do. It's not something that we strive for. How can we get better? I think as we're faced with, I think as Admiral Pitts brought up, non-standard sea control and sea denial, there's a nexus of seaborne sea control and sea denial and terrestrial effects in that domain as well. And my evidence is the Ukrainians in the Black Sea, and of course the Houthis in the Red Sea, from a terrestrial position, impacting and influencing what goes on or what doesn't go on the sea. On the Ukrainian side, I mean, they forced the entire Black Sea fleet into what Alfred Thayer Mahan would have called the Fortress Fleet. They can't come out beyond the defensive measures of their terrestrial systems. Now imagine if the Ukrainians had a surface fleet that had the competency akin to the US Navy. Imagine if the Houthis had a surface fleet akin to the United States Navy. Now there's some real sea control and sea denial capability. So flip the coin over. You've got a United States Marine Corps with the capability and capacity to affect sea influence from the shore, and of course the United States Navy that has, there's nobody in the same sport as them.
So some of what has been playing out in Ukraine and the Black Sea region has actually sort of affirmed some of the changes that force design, the new force design has anticipated, essentially, has proven it out. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And when you look very closely at how the Ukrainians have performed their tactics, the systems they have used, the effect that they've had, and the refinements that they've made, it's almost like a playbook from our force design architecture.
And do you think our adversaries are watching what's happening in that region and looking and sort of interpret, the lessons that they're gleaning from the war, the the war in Ukraine and what's happening, and how do you see our adversaries absorbing those lessons, thinking about them, and looking at how we're responding and learning from them as well?
Yeah, I think that there's absolutely a keen observation on the part of especially the Chinese into, first of all, that I don't think there's such a thing as a short, sharp conflict, and they're realizing that. They're looking at the TTPs that may not be like what they envision the future, and they're adjusting to it, and we're seeing it. So they are learning just as we are learning. It's, the learning game of who learns and applies faster and more effectively.
Yeah, and absorbs the lessons into the force, right? The problem of adoption. So in terms of contested logistics, distributed operations we spoke about a little bit is one approach, an operational concept for addressing the problem of contested logistics, of needing to operate far from our shores and sustaining a force there. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Marines are thinking about that problem set?
Yeah, there's big L logistics with the big C contest, and that is our supply chains, countries of origin of things that we really need, cyber impacts all along that chain to where it gets to an OEM, to where it gets to a warehouse, where it gets to some means of conveyance to get out to where it's needed. I think a great example of that right now is the rare earths and exquisite alloys that are extremely susceptible to disruption, whether it's export controls, whether it's just withholding, and whether it's the fact that we don't have much of our own. That's big L, big C. Now, littler L, or tactical and operational L, closing what I would call that last 500 miles in the Pacific. We've got, for instance, in the Pacific, but certainly not exclusive to the Pacific, things that we are working on, base resiliency, not only from a hardening standpoint, but from a cyber hardening standpoint, so that we have a logistics base to launch from, and we're not taken out before we even start. We're looking at our global positioning network, terrestrial segment to it, a seaborne segment to it. So in strategic places, moving things forward to cheat time and space, so it's in place, closer to the point of friction, where we don't have to rely on longer lines of communication. Now the seaborne segment, whether it's MPF ships, maritime prepositioning force ships, or whether it is traditional amphibious ships, whether it's a medium landing ship that we hope to procure, surface-to-surface connectors, or ancillary smaller vessels, all of those, plus an air segment of V-22, KC-130, CH-53K, gives us a more comprehensive approach to moving commodities longer distances through multi-path ways to communicate. All that said, you have to have ability to command and control it. You have to have more or less a unity of IT so that you can see within each segment what is there, who controls it, and what methods of conveyance there are to get there. And then how does that integrate with the larger joint logistics enterprise?
Yeah. A simple problem set.
Yeah.
Very. So in terms of thinking about the audience here, a lot of innovators, tech, VC funders, what's sort of your wish list from them? What do you wish that they could give you in terms of the technologies they're developing, what they're seeing? What more things would you like from them? How can they be more helpful to the Marines and to the department as a whole? Or is it all the problems? They're ready and willing. Are the problems all on the DoD side?
Yeah, I don't think there's any shortage of technological solutions out there. I mean, if I had my wish list, I would say, please help me with kill webs, thicken my kill webs, make me better to rationalize multi-path, multi-source ingestion of data, rationalize that data into decision-worthy propositions, so that I can either make a decision at an organic level or offboard that once again to a joint solution. Another thing I would say is organic ISR payloads, whether they're kinetic, whether they're non-kinetic, whether they're passive or active. The technology is there, but how do we integrate that once again into that kill web so that low latency, high throughput to what those systems are seeing at speed, and getting that information once again down to people who could use it in a format that they can use it for. We just got done talking pretty extensively about logistics. Technologically, we need to join all the different systems that are out there that keep track of ordnance, that keep track of classes of supply, that keep track of where things are, who owns them, and how to communicate them to the point of need. So there's just a visibility aspect to it, but then there is a predictive aspect to it. All the data that comes in on usage types, usage rates, places of use, a technological intervention that can tell you or help tell you what you will need, when you will need it, and when you're going to need it.
Okay, so hopefully people in the audience are listening. It's a big list. So I was wondering, as we sort of get toward the end of our discussion, I was wandering around the floor earlier and came across, a large display. You guys have a big display out there. Have you seen it? Your display? Yeah.
I saw them racing drones and doing pull-ups.
Yeah. Well, I stopped and I asked one of the
I
Marines.
can do one, but I can't do the other.
Which one? Yeah, we won't ask. I asked one of the Marines, well, what should I ask General Mahoney? And he said, you should ask him what's your favorite thing about being a Marine, and really has that, and I'm adding this last part, has that, do you think, changed over time? So answering that question early in your career and today, and I didn't ask him what his answer would be. I should have, but I thought it was a good question, so I'll ask it.
Yeah, I spent most of my life going up and down a boarding ladder, flying F-18s and F-35s, and I thought that was the reason to be, but I think, and no exaggeration, when you look at the young Marines out there, that is the reason why you want to stick around after 38 years or so. They are motivated, they're resilient, they have surrendered to a life of things that we don't talk about a lot in this town, which is honor, courage, and commitment. That's kind of what they signed up for. And that in of itself, I think, is exceptional, and if exceptional means better, I'll take that.
Yeah. And does the rifleman of the past look like the rifleman of the future? How is that individual changing?
Yeah, I think the rifleman of the past is kind of like me. Can't race a drone, can probably do a pull-up. The rifleman of the present is someone who comes into the service with a basal metabolic rate of digital awareness that is well beyond anything that I could ever imagine. So you have the raw material of someone who can integrate easily into a digital universe and hold up the end of the honor, courage, and commitment part as well.
And the Corps is appreciating having, being able to bring those types of people into the force, retaining them, and is changing enough to do that?
Yeah, I think we have been very, very, and not to exaggerate, we've been very successful with the two pistons of building your force structure. One is retention, and one is accession, recruiting people. And I think this year, for the second year in a row, we'll set a record for the folks that we retain. And if you remember back to one of the pillars of force design is talent management. So we're keeping that talent aboard. They're wanting to re-enlist, to stay in. And so we get a more senior, more seasoned force in that regard from a retention standpoint. On the accession side, we are despite the headwinds, despite the doom and gloom of the demographics of the young people who are not, they're challenged physically, they're challenged mentally. I don't believe that. There is a demographic out there that our professional recruiting force goes after, and they find. Once again, young men and women that are mentally, morally, and physically qualified that will accept a challenge to go stand on the yellow footprints at one of our recruit depots, or go to Quantico as an officer candidate and take on, surrender to honor, courage, and commitment. And if they rise to that challenge, then they get to call themselves a Marine.
So as we close, since this is the AI Expo, I feel like maybe we haven't actually spoken about AI enough. Is there anything at the end, a last word about AI specifically and the Marine Corps that we should be thinking about as a whole?
Yeah, I think like the other services, we are looking for points in our processes to look at what the proposition of the process is, what we believe the solution is, decompose that process, and look at points along that where a digital solution can make it faster, more accurate, and save human frailties, human time, and human endurance. The examples that I might give is automatic target recognition. The examples that I'll give, and this is mundane, in our pursuit of a third clean audit, we still have swivel chair data exchange and analysis going on, where someone will manually back data out of one ledger system, swivel around, enter it into another data system, and analyze it manually. We are working very closely with some vendors to get an AI or automated system where it can take an invoice to the originating document that may have data differences that would have to be reconciled by a human, determine that there are differences, look inside those two documents for patterns of similarity, and then bring them together at machine speed. And I will tell you from experience, and again, this is mundane, in audit world, we have thousands of those cases where a human has to adjudicate it. And we want to get to a point where AI or algorithm intervention can not make a mistake, work very quickly, and get that human to be able to go do something else.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, General Mahoney. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.